Let's wait for that sound to go away.
I know.
There it is. I call to order the Lake Mills Plan Commission meeting of January 24, 2023, and we can proceed with roll call.
Okay, I'll proceed with roll call. Why don't we go from Ms. Lazaris? Are you present?
Indeed.
Mr. Foster?
Here.
Attorney
Mr.
Drescher,
Green?
we have sound now if you want me to do it.
Mr. Coots? Mr. Holman?
Here.
Ms. Bishop?
Here.
Okay, I have 5 of the 7.
All right. All right, thank you. And next we have item number 3, correction and/or approval of the meeting minutes of November 22nd, 2022.
I will move adoption of the meeting minutes for 11/22/22.
Mr. Grady will second.
All right, it's been moved by Mr. Foster and seconded by Mr. Grady to approve the minutes of November 22nd. Any discussion? All right, in that case, we'll proceed with the roll call vote.
Mr. Holman,
Abstain.
Ms. Lazaris,
Aye.
Mr. Grady,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Mr. Foster.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
All right, next, item number 4, the public may address the commission at this time regarding items on the agenda, unless the item is the subject of a public hearing. We do not have a public hearing this evening, but public comment may be made at this time. But the state's open meeting law discourages action by the commission on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep comments limited to 3 minutes. State your name and address when starting your comments. Also fill out the sign-in sheet at the podium. For people online, please type your name and address in the chat feature. Are there any public comments at this time?
Yes.
All right, but please come up to the podium and please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Kirk Lund. I live at 409 Fremont Street here in Lake Mills. Fremont Street is on the list of streets designated for bike paths. Currently, Fremont Street is not wide enough for 2 parking lanes and 2 traffic lanes. When cars are parked on both sides of the street, this reduces the passable traffic path down to just 1 lane. So the only feasible way to install dedicated bike lanes on Fremont Street appears to be to widen the street. Immense opposition from residents most often prevents dedicated bike path plans from being enacted. I am opposed to widening Fremont Street to install dedicated bike lanes. To do so would appear to necessitate cutting down the boulevard trees, which would be a tragedy. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lund. Are there any other questions, any other comments at this time?
Todd Templey, 408 Fremont. At the November meeting, it was stated that the comprehensive plan was responsible for the South Main Street bike lanes. That's not really true. As a member of the Public Works Board who reviewed that, City Council Member Rudy Scharr was leading discussion to not have them because of the concerns it reduced the tree line if you had to widen the street. And nobody was presenting the Public Works Board with any data showing a need. But ultimately, the DOT said that because of the state law for funding for streets that are state highway projects, sidewalks and bike lanes were required. So in order to obtain, I think it was over $1 million in grant money, we went ahead and installed bike lanes, and that's the only reason why bike lanes were installed there. Since then, that law has been repealed. So now we're free to discuss whether bike lanes are a need or a want. And also, as Kirk mentioned, I'm on Fremont as well. And that was the official subject in the official Public Works Board meeting agenda, where the street engineer said, don't take out parking, because I guess the congested parking, it calms traffic. So the question is, if you're going to put bike lanes in, where are they gonna go? If you don't widen the street, you're just gonna put them in the middle of the street with the traffic lane, which is even more sillier. And also to address the comprehensive plan for pedestrians, your proposed pedestrian plan mentions the WSDOT Pedestrian Policy 2020 document. In 2000, the Lake Mills Public Works Board created a pedestrian plan without using paid consultants. For that reason, I was selected to be on the Citizens Advisory Committee for the WSDOT 2020 pedestrian plan. You open the document and see my name on page 2. As a member of that committee, we discussed the issues of installing sidewalks in 100-year-old neighborhoods, and the WSDOT plan used recommendations from the 2000 Lake Mills Public Works Board plan. Most notably, it was lessons learned from the Ferry Street sidewalk project. Well, since the comprehensive plan has been passed since 2006, it seems that the city councils since then are not following recommendations for handling and installing sidewalks in old neighborhoods. And most normally, this just happened in 2022 with Marguerite Street. And what's even more unfortunate, the city council ordinance for the public works board says that new sidewalks must come with a recommendation and review first from the public works board, and that did not happen for that street. We only unofficially found it through the grapevine that went on, and as yet we have not seen any details or no information, really no clear explanation why the council voted to install new sidewalks without a recommendation or a review from the Public Works Board. So as a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee for the WSDOT Pedestrian Policy 2020 plan, I'm declaring the City of Lake Mills pedestrian plan and the City Council sidewalk policies are poorly planned and not in the best interest of city residents. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Temperley. Would anyone else like to speak at this time?
Yes, thank you. My name is Mike Witt, and I live at 421 Fremont Street here in Lake Mills, and I'm also here to address the bike lane issue. I am a fan of multimodal transportation, and I ride a bicycle recreationally and to meetings in town in good weather when I can. I can tell you that some of the planned routes, Fremont and Ferry, are simply not practical for a bicyclist. They have to be two of the steepest grades in the city. When I first started riding bicycle again for exercise, it probably took me 6 months to get to the point where I could ride all the way back up that hill to my house. If I want to go anywhere south to Bartles, to the trail down at the south end of town, I go down Fremont Street and then over on Madison to the nice bike lanes that we have on South Main Street that run all the way to the trail. I would echo Kirk's comments on Fremont Street. I can't cite chapter and verse like Mr. Temperley, but I've been living in that house for 30 years now, and I can recall a time probably a decade or two ago during a street construction project when Fremont Street, which is relatively short, was sort of polled by the residents at that time, do you want us to widen the street? And the answer was no. It's a purely residential street. And as has already been stated, when there's parking on both sides, you have to wait for somebody else to pass. So in terms of putting a bike lane, if I wanted to ride my bike from somewhere on the north end of town over to Bartles, I'd be cutting across on College, not on Fremont, unless I was looking for a heck of a workout and a shower at the end of the ride. I also think that it's important to try and connect the Brookstone community to the rest of town, but I would make the observation that if someone built a house in the middle of a cornfield, they weren't particularly interested in walkability at the time that they did that. And you could easily address any problems with walkability or bikeability on the existing road, especially as you get out that far, by dropping the speed limit to 25 miles an hour to that intersection and turning that into a four-way stop. That would address any safety issues regarding to kids or bicyclists trying to use that road to get downtown where they can pick up the existing bike path. So I'm a big fan of planning for bicycles and pedestrians in the long term. And I understand this all may have been done, years ago, but looking at it on the ground now, it just doesn't seem practical, and I would ask you to consider that if it comes before you. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dix. Would anyone like to speak under this item? Item number 4, questions and public comment is still open. Would anyone else like to comment under item number 4? Is there anyone else who would like to comment at this time? All right, hearing none, then we go on to item number 5. Discussion, recommendation, and request for a zoning amendment from Ryan Malone, Lake Mills, for the purpose of changing the zoning from Planned Business PB to Planned Business with Planned Development District Overlay for the property located at W7411 Cty Hwy V, Lake Mills, parcel number 246071312140002, which is currently tabled. And I would like to ask Mr. Daly and our consulting planners for an update on where this proposed rezoning is today.
I'll ask Attorney Drescher to weigh in, but I believe in order to initiate discussion or staff comment, we would need a motion to take off the table.
Aye.
Yeah, let's take care of that formality.
Aye, very well. Is there a motion to take this off the table?
Ms. Lazarus, this is Ms. Bishop. I move to remove from the table this item on the zoning amendment for Ryan Malone for the purpose of changing the zoning from planned business to planned business with a planned development district overlay.
All right. Is there a second?
Which one are we taking off? Are we taking off 22-9-5 or?
There is a new motion prepared.
Yeah, how does that?
Right now, I did review basically where we're at, and motion 22-9-5 was a prepared motion following the hearing on this particular item in September. That was tabled. The action itself was tabled. Subsequently, in November, it was addressed. I believe it was November, either the last meeting in October or November. It was addressed, and it remained on the table at that time. We prepared a new motion, which is an exact mirror of the current or the former motion, just to put it into the new year with our record system and as a recognition that it is being addressed tonight. So I would basically move to take the original motion and remove that from the table to be able to be addressed. And at the time when we adopt, the numbering has changed, but the meat of the document has not. So I would just motion to adopt the new numbering. Does that make sense? It's the same motion. We've changed the numbering to represent that it's going to be, if it is adopted, that it's being addressed and going to be adopted at this specific meeting, just for record-keeping purposes.
Right, okay.
Okay, so I had moved to untable the discussion item, but it sounds like I should withdraw that, and I should move to untable Plan Commission Motion 22-9-5, which was previously tabled in September 2022.
That is my understanding, correct?
Okay, then that's the motion I make, to remove PC Motion 22-9-5 from the table.
All right, then I will second it.
Okay, Mrs. Bishop has moved and Mr. Foster has seconded to take the previous motion 22-9-5 off the table and consider it again tonight under a revised motion to update the time of year. Any comments about this motion? In that case, I'll proceed with the roll call vote.
Mr. Grady?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Holman?
Aye.
Mrs. Harris?
That was you.
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, very good. All right, in that case, we proceed with our discussion and again return to staff to get an update of of where the proposal is today.
Thank you, Ms. Lazaris. I'm going to briefly recap a few things. When last we spoke about this was in September of last year. Just a reminder that the petitioner is proposing a 90-room hotel at the corner of County A and County V. As you can see on the screen, that is immediately east of the now Kunis RV facilities. When we spoke at that time about the project, there were certainly concerns raised about the need for off-site improvements. Over the last few months, those have been the primary focus of discussions between the city, the petitioner, and most notably the county. And we can walk through some of those details. There were a handful of items that are in the memo that we can talk about as we kind of move forward. Related to site improvements. Ultimately, the use of the planned development district does require your approval, the council's approval. Specifically, they're requesting some exceptions. Most notably is a height exception from 35 feet to 54 feet to accommodate the 90-room development. The development does also have on the first floor multiple meeting rooms and a swimming pool, as well as other kind of public space. How would you like us to walk through this? Would you like to hear from the petitioner kind of as an overall? Would you like us to walk through elements of the general development plan?
So all we're being asked today is for the zoning, right?
You are being asked for the zoning, but because it's a planned development district, it really does encompass everything. All of the engineering, site design, landscaping, building architecture, building materials, lighting, the off-site improvements. So it is kind of a comprehensive package.
Yeah, I would kind of like to understand why it's PDD with overlay and understand the whole process of why they're asking for that. And is it because of the height?
Yes, it is specifically because of the height. Yes.
Yeah, that's why I'd like to know all that, so, yeah.
I think the petitioner should kind of comment on the number of rooms that are necessary for the project to make the project work. We did certainly talk to the fire department in this, and they said they are certainly more than capable of servicing a building of that height with their existing equipment in case that issue came up.
Do we know why, I'm sorry, is it okay if I ask some questions?
Of course, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
sorry
yeah.
about that. Do we know why that limitation was set before this came up, the 34 feet,
The 35 feet?
35 feet?
That is, in the base zoning district, that is the maximum height requirement.
For business?
And for planned
For
business.
planned business, yes,
Okay.
yes. That's generally a 3 to 3.5 story building, right?
Yeah, there was no other restrictions other than that's what was set.
Correct.
It wasn't set for any specific regulation that we knew about as far as, like, you're talking fire department or something like that?
No, it aligned with previous zoning districts from the old code.
Okay.
And at that time, there was no decision made to increase it. There wasn't anybody, there wasn't any need to. It's not, in industrial, there's a different requirement or allowable height. But for the planned business, that's what was brought forward. And again, the planned development district does enable an exception to the code if the plan commission, ultimately the council, feel it's warranted. The building, sorry, I'm experiencing a little bit of lag. As you can see, is generally a 4-story building. First floors are a little bit higher than a standard 10-foot floor. This is a masonry building with composite materials, obviously lots of windows and a portico. The height exception obviously is for some of these vertical elements and ultimately to have that 4-story. I would suspect that's a business decision on their market analysis shows that There is certainly need not just for a hotel, but for a hotel of this size, and to provide the certain amenities that they are showing on the first floor, certain conference rooms, pools, et cetera, that 90 room threshold is desired by them. I would defer to the petitioner to talk about that in more detail. I can't really speak to it as to the why more than that.
All right. All right, thank you, Mr. Wolf. Well, planning commissioners, we do have the prepared motion 2311, which is the same except for the date of if the plan commission does pass this motion, the date of the passage is different. Otherwise, this is the same motion as we saw in September. So what we have before us is motion 2311, recommendation to City Council for a zoning amendment. Petitioner Ryan Malone on behalf of owner Kingbird Real Estate II LLC, property identified as West 7411 County Highway V, Lake Mills, Wisconsin. Parcel number 246071312140002. This motion does set forth the city's zoning authority under Wisconsin state statutes, calls out the rezoning requirements in city code, sets forth the requested rezoning from PB planned business to PB with planned development district overlay, calls out the review by city staff and consultants, calls out the September 27th public hearing and Plan Commission review. This motion does provide for a Plan Commission recommendation to the City Council to approve the requested rezoning, subject to Chapter 660 zoning regulations and procedures and meeting requirements that are noted in the planner's memo.
If you like, I can certainly highlight some of the specific elements.
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
Most notable was the access to and from the site along County V. As you can see on the graphic here, considerable coordination was completed with city's public works, engineering, the county, and the petitioner for improvements into County V. They are dedicated turn lanes onto the site for the eastbound traffic. There is a taper for westbound traffic to be able to get out of the main line and to make a right turn into the site. The access point, because there's only the opportunity for a single access point here, was widened to have dedicated left and right turns out onto County V, and then a single lane in to ensure that there's say organization of the on-site circulation. Stormwater management for this site is provided entirely underground. That has been reviewed by Strand and Associates, and they have not found any significant concerns that need addressing. They do have a separate memo, of course, as part of their review that would be, if this is approved, that would be included as a part of that approval. The on-site footprint, we have, real quick, sidewalk extension from County A to the western lot line. There's a TAP grant approval project that's going to be going on that's going to be extending more sidewalk on the north side. The only gap that we will have is at the Kunis RV because that's in the town. And hopefully that can be overcome in short order. There's sidewalk certainly on the south side. But this is an important improvement on the north side to completing sidewalk and to having investment, obviously, in this, I'll say, somewhat challenging site because of its location. The site will have good visibility for eastbound traffic on I-43. Westbound traffic, 94, excuse me. But westbound traffic, the bridge will be, you only see really the top floor of this. But again, the site has good circulation, has been evaluated by the fire department to see if there are any concerns with it. None were raised with it. me a second here. On building signage, it does comply with our code requirements. They will be on a couple of elevations facing the roadways. They'll be prominent. Sorry, here. If there's detailed questions on the landscaping plan, we can get into it, but a very robust landscaping plan for this. So it's nice to see that parking areas, views to and from parking areas will be mitigated, and especially at night for lights shining into the roadways. Great foundation plantings around the site. Again, it is a proposed 4-story building. That is something you certainly do have to approve. But there is excellent perimeter landscaping, landscape islands throughout the site in compliance with our codes. And as I said, good diversity of species and materials, meeting our minimum planting sizes. There's specific questions, I'll defer to Brian as a landscape architect. There are a couple retaining walls on site that they will be maintaining. If you've been out to the site, there is considerable topography along the east side of it. There's a refuse facility out on the northwest corner of the site. The details have been provided that it will, the enclosure will match the building, which is a requirement of our code. They did provide a snow storage plan that meets with acceptance from the city staff. The building elevations, we had asked for some minor alterations based upon the first submittal back in September. They have made those changes. They've added more masonry or brick-type materials on there. Again, there are good combinations of materials. The materials do meet the requirement of the code for hardiness, for stone, brick, block in combination with other materials, and of course lots of windows as you'd expect for this type of development. Any rooftop mechanicals have been screened. But it is certainly, architecture is something that is under your purview to see if you are satisfied with what's being provided here, or if you feel that any enhancements are necessary. From a staff perspective, it does meet the requirements and does qualify for approval, but it is a planned development district, so you certainly do have the latitude to make other recommendations should you see fit. The side elevations, as you can see here, kind of showed the covered portico areas for your drop-off pickup. Again, 2 exceptions to the code are being requested. One is the height of 54 feet, which is 19 over what's allowed by code. The other is an interior landscaping requirement. We require a 20-foot minimum. Site's somewhat constrained, and they're asking for 11 feet. So that would also be a highlighted exception to code. In the end, the staff is recommending approval of this, that the roadway and sidewalk improvements be required as they've been illustrated on the plans. Some minor signage alterations, which can be handled with the building permits ultimately, and then of course any of the recommendations from engineering, public works, fire department didn't have any specific written recommendations. We're welcome to answer any questions you may have about this, any details, but I know that the access in County A and V issues were certainly a prominent concern of the Plan Commission.
I just have one question.
Yeah, Mr. Holman.
In the beginning of your presentation, I just couldn't hear what you said. You said something is entirely handled underground. Whoa.
Stormwater management is entirely underground. So if you look at the site, it does not look like there's any stormwater management. It is actually all beneath the parking lot.
Oh, it's not fees in lieu of heading to Otter Pond?
No.
It's all on site?
No, it is all on site below ground. It's been reviewed by Strand.
Okay, thanks.
So how far down is bedrock then? Are they going through that? Water detention?
I'm sorry, I have to defer to Dwayne.
The detailed plans, I think in this case, they're looking at piping under the parking lot that creates a detention basin. So rather than off in a grassed area digging a basin and then allowing that stormwater to detain there at a time, they're providing that simply a foot or two underneath the pavement structure, and then we'll outlet to the existing storm sewer that is the county's storm sewer at the north, I'm sorry, it would be the southwest corner of the lot.
So nothing would be leaching out, it would just be going to a stormwater that the county runs?
To my knowledge, it's not an infiltration basin, but it is to control the stormwater on the site. Any other questions?
Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, Plan Commissioners, do you have any other questions for staff or for the applicant? And staff, do you have any other observations at this time?
I know that this is, we usually just kind of vote on the height restriction and things like that, but I'm just curious, have we done any research on how a hotel of this kind of size would impact the economy of the town? Or how it generally does in towns like this when you have no hotel, you have little small, small ones, but not anything like this size.
Yeah, and again, I'll start, but I'm sure Drake has many comments on this. We don't have a formal chain hotel in town. Obviously, we have Airbnbs and we have bed and breakfasts, which are obviously important. But for the business community, industrial users, having a hotel in the community is certainly very important. We don't have any meeting space. We have smaller spaces as well, but again, not many. I think it's a big boon to the city to have a large chain hotel to locate here. We do rely on them to do their market analysis, to say that, you know, we did there was an analysis that was done by a third party as a part of the Sandy Beach kind of redevelopment proposal. And it certainly said that there is the need for some type of lodging. The city explored at that time whether it should be in the lodging business, and it said no, not the direction they want to go. And Mr. Foster was a council member at that time. But there are obviously no hotels here. Obviously, you go down to Johnson Creek, there's one. Go to the west towards Sun Prairie, there's some, but in Cottage Grove, but nothing here. A hotel does open a lot of doors, tourism related. I'm sure.
Yeah, I think a good way to describe it is opportunity, and it creates opportunities that otherwise don't exist in the community currently for having overnight stays for events that may be going on. If there are businesses that are holding trainings, bringing people from out of town, that meeting space on the first floor is also something that's at a premium in Lake Mills right now that would be taken advantage of. It also provides hotels can provide alternative revenue streams to the local government in the form of a room tax, and can also provide an additional revenue stream to a tourism entity that the city would designate to provide. City gets to keep 30% of room tax revenue, 70% of it has to go to a tourism entity that is dedicated towards generating overnight stays, hosting, trying to bring people to town, bring tourism to town, and have people stay in those hotels and generate economic activity. So I think it's certainly an unmet need in the community right now, not something that our community is able to accommodate right now in the form of a hotel like this, and then also just opens up a variety of other opportunities that we may be missing out on because of that gap.
Thank you.
There's a fair amount of leakage because you have great events. Obviously, the brewery has a number of events. You have the sprint triathlons. You have town and country days. Again, people can come in for a few hours, but they generally need to leave to lodge somewhere else and spend dollars somewhere else, unfortunately, so.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Miss Lazarus, it's Miss Bishop. I have a few questions, if I may.
All right, Mrs. Bishop.
Okay, part of the reason this was tabled at the last meeting in September, it was a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, which comes first, the PDD with a zoning change or the development plan or a PIP, and it seems like we're still combining it all together, which is fine. I find that the petitioner's request now is in line with the staff suggestions and implementation of the plan. But along those lines, I have a couple of questions procedurally in regard to some of the comments tonight. Is there any reason why, or should this sidewalk plan go to the Public Works Board in any way, or does that come later? And the street issue, I guess. Does the Public Works Board need to review
The county.
A couple of issues with that, Ms. Bishop. This is Attorney Drescher. The sidewalk plan is part of a grant program that's already been basically scheduled to start this year. Then the second issue, I mean, with regard to the sidewalk in front of this particular development, I think that's fair game. You can certainly discuss that under the PDD. With regard to the adoption of the plan, that's been adopted by the council and I believe is a spring project that's scheduled to start this year. So I'm not sure that this is the right venue to discuss or potentially change that.
Okay, sure, I understand that. And then the next sort of procedural issue or requirement in our ordinance is it's subsection F under 660-206, and it's again one of these little requirements, but it says essentially that the petitioner shall enter into a development agreement with the city. Does that come after this is recommended and approved by the council?
That's the way I was approaching it. Tough to draft a development agreement without, a precise implementation plan or the general development plan as a whole. I'm looking at the consolidated PDD approval process that addresses both GDP and PIP in one kind of fell swoop through the Plan Commission and then on to the council. I believe that at the council level, either a proposed development agreement will be ready for review or the change in the development permitting for the project itself could be contingent upon a development agreement being authorized and accepted by the parties involved, the petitioner and the council.
Okay, that makes sense also. And then my final question, and again, it has to do with procedures in the ordinance, is the petitioner has to provide a written description of the exemptions from requirements they are seeking, and the petitioner here has done that now in these revised documents. So since the motion is recognizing the PDD and the change in zoning with that overlay, is there an appropriate place here where we should put that in these paragraphs like A, B, C, where like here's the exemptions they're requesting and it is the maximum of 54 feet and an 11 or a minimum of 11-foot setback? Or do we just rely on sub-paragraph C where it says petitioner is meeting the requirements in the planner's memo?
I think that's fair game for you. If you want to motion to change either motion that ultimately is moved for adoption, that would be appropriate. I do tend to lean onto the latter, that by that statement, they're complying with all of the terms of the planner's memo. They arguably have complied with ordinance generally here already. I think the PIP and the GDP is what we are relying on as the city and moving forward with them. So I think you've nailed it, that there is an acknowledgement. They have provided the necessary plans to move forward. We're requiring through this motion that they comply with all the terms of the planner's memo as well as ordinance. And the planner's memo does specifically state that those are the changes. So for clarity, I honestly wouldn't have a problem with you motioning to include such items if you feel that it's necessary. But I do believe that the motion as drafted does accomplish that goal.
Okay, if you think the motion accomplishes that in reliance on the planner's memo, that's fine. I thought the memo was, and the petitioner's new documents were actually very clear in what they were requesting, so I appreciated that clarity. But Mr. Drescher, then I will just rely on your assertion that the motion as written is sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank you, Mrs. Bishop. Plan Commissioners, does anyone else have any other comments or questions concerning this proposed rezoning?
Excuse me, can I add to my comments earlier? Had a chance to look at the plan.
Yeah.
Some of the details on C12 do show that the underground piping does have it's an arch type pipe. Actually, the bottom of that pipe will be open for infiltration to the subgrade below the pavement below those pipes. There's also a small bioretention pond in the northeast corner. So there are some of those features as well. I may have misstated earlier that most of it is contained within that piping. Still the same, the detention is still contained in that piping and will be released into the county highway storm sewer system. But there is some features of infiltration that I failed to state earlier. So just wanted to clarify for you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Van der Roos. Are there any other comments or questions concerning this rezoning? Does anyone wish to make a motion regarding the motion 2311?
So I'll make the motion to adopt motion 2311 as currently written.
It's been moved by Mr.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved in by Mr. Foster and seconded by Mr. Grady to pass motion 2311 as written. Are there any discussion on this matter?
Yeah, the only one I had is we didn't get a chance to talk to the builders or the owners of it. Do we want to ask them any questions about the amount of rooms and any leeway or anything like that? Does anybody have any problems with that or have any other questions for those folks? Ms. Bishop?
I think I'm okay, Mr. Foster. If you had questions, I would second a motion to suspend the rules, but that's up to you, I think,
Okay.
at this point.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody had everything answered since those folks are here and we can ask them questions if we want to.
All right. Is there an interest in doing so? I'm hearing none. All right, we still have the motion by Mr. Foster and seconded by Mr. Grady to adopt motion 2311. Any further discussion on this matter? In that case, we'll proceed with roll call vote.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Mr. Foster,
Aye.
Mr. Holman,
Aye.
Ms. Lazaris,
Aye.
Mr. Grady.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you. The next item, I have number 6, discussion on comprehensive plan update. And I'd like to call on the consulting planners to bring us up to date on where the process is now and what we are going to focus on reviewing this evening.
Thank you. If you can just give me 1 second here. We're in the home stretches, which is great news. Obviously tonight we are going to finalize some of the land use, transportation, and utility chapters. And when I say finalize, that's finalizing the draft of them. There still is a public review period that's enabled a public hearing, et cetera. And we're going to talk about housing and neighborhood development tonight. Next month, we're looking at the agriculture, cultural, and natural resources chapter, along with economic development. And then in March, intergovernmental cooperation and implementation, kind of wrapping everything up before we would get into the statutory adoption process, which generally takes about 45 odd days. There's a 30-day specific open book period that has to be complied with. But still taking in public comment in any form. Obviously, we had people here tonight during the meeting to make some comments, and Brian's taking some notes on those. Online is a comment form. They're available also at City Hall, and emails, et cetera, to elected officials, appointed officials, city staff will all get incorporated into the discussion ultimately for Plan Commission and Council to make decisions on. So I want to make sure that it's never too late to provide input. And again, we are still reaching out and talking with specific groups on issues that are of concern of theirs in these chapters. Takes a little while to get to some of these items from when we spoke to them originally. We want to make sure that when they get a draft, they're having a chance to look at it and provide good feedback. So I'm just going to move to I guess as a general comment on to the Plan Commission about the transportation chapter and the utilities and community facilities chapter. We provided those well in advance. We've had a lot of discussion over a number of months on them to tidy up any issues. That's really what we want here, is to, I'll say, sort of put it to bed so we can move forward. That does not mean that it's never to be discussed again. We had comments tonight in the public comment period about the bike ped and trails kind of issue with roadways. The comprehensive plan certainly does make some recommendations about connectivity, about bike and pedestrian facilities. We do have the adopted plans, and we reference them. In 2005, the city's consulting engineer, Strand and Associates, developed the city's transportation plan, its sidewalk plan, and its bicycle plan. And those are the elements that have been brought into this, in addition to recommendations that were being carried forward from the last comprehensive plan. So I wouldn't say that there is really new routes being planned, but one of the challenges we have here is a comprehensive plan really is at the 10,000 foot level. Really, it's not so boots on the ground. That is, when it gets to implementing certain sections of this, we do rely on those other long-range plans. This document certainly does call for a revisiting of those, because 2005 was a little while ago. And certainly things have changed. And issues that were raised tonight about, are those really the best routes? Certainly should be revisited. The Public Works Board certainly should be weighing in on questions and concerns related to infrastructure. I do just want to highlight that when we do talk about on-road facilities, there are certain places where a dedicated lane may be appropriate, like Highway 89. There are other places where we would look at signage or sharrows, which is just pavement marking, to be an on-street bike lane, if you will. That it raises awareness of the traveling public, vehicle drivers, that bicycles are intended to be on this route, and it also kind of directs bicyclists to preferred routes, because while many local roads here are certainly easy to travel on, when we're trying to navigate the community east-west in its entirety, or north-south in its entirety, we really only have a handful of roadways that are best for that, right? Ferry Drive is one of those discussions that should be had. We did bring forward in here a discussion of maybe evaluating a bike boulevard on certain routes to enhance a route to be better for bicycle movement, right? That cars might be sort of secondary on a certain route. Again, that's a bigger conversation, but you do see communities doing that, saying this specific roadway, Smith Street, is going to be the primary east-west route in our community, and we are going to make it I'll say the nicest, safest route for bicyclists to use, right? Because it's not practical to make every route the safest route with certain types of improvements, right? Could be change of pavement colors, certain pavement markings, right? Could be a dedicated lane. So we do bring those issues up in this plan. We do not make a specific recommendation. It may have a, for example, this route, but implementation of these types of items certainly still falls to Public Works, Plan Commission, Engineering, and the council to make those decisions. So I just want to touch on that, and if you have more feedback related to the comments you received, that we should be folding in. We're all ears.
Okay, Plan Commissioners and staff, you may have seen the letter by Melissa Freeman and her comments on bike path on South Ferry Drive, and that came in a while ago, yesterday. But today, you may not have seen another letter that also was discussing bike paths, so I'll just see that you have it right now. So, I should have seen that you had this a lot sooner. Remiss in not giving this to you before. That's something else that came through.
Yeah, that's one too.
Well, yeah, there was that's right, Mr. Greedy mentioned there's another letter. There was one by Melissa Freeman. They came in yesterday, and the Plan Commissioners, if you reviewed this before later today, then you would have seen the one by Melissa Freeman. So there are two letters talking about concerns about bike paths, bike lanes, and so on, especially in the context of older neighborhoods, and the effect on the character of older neighborhoods. So we do have that, and we heard this evening people coming forward and talking about the potential impacts on local streets for such improvements. So I think those are good ideas to incorporate into any discussions of bicycle accommodations throughout the city.
Ms. Lazaris, I have a general question, if I may.
Yeah, Mrs. Bishop?
It looks like other people are reading the letter. Mr. Wolf, my question is about signage. Is it possible to have, well, let me backtrack a little bit. I see a bike route as possibly being different from, let's say, shared bike lanes or a bike boulevard, in that a route could be the city's preferred way to get people from like point A to point B through main thoroughfares that is marked maybe with something that's more like trail signage. Like I was just looking them up. You have the green bike signs with the arrow, and you could use that as the same way you would road signage versus implementing the Sharrow or marked lanes. Do you see that differentiation in your work, or once you mark a bike route, is it like required then to put in the lanes on the street?
No, it is certain. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just trying to make sure, like, I'm discussing this with you, but is that like, are those two different things, the route that can be designated with sign, like trail markage, versus the actual lane designation on the street?
Absolutely. When we say an on-street lane, there are situations like 89 where it could be appropriate to have a demarcated on-street lane. There are places where just signage, street signage in the terrace would be appropriate. And again, as we were showing, there are maybe routes where having Sharrows or that pavement marking to raise awareness to drivers that this is a preferred route for bicycles is appropriate. We feel the comprehensive plan is not the place to get into that level of detail. That really is the pedestrian plan, the bicycle plan, and the transportation plan, because it does get to that boots on the ground level of the width of specific roadways, the need for certain parking, what type of future improvements are going to be happening on those roadways, and then if and or how it can accommodate other mobility, non-motorized mobility, bicycles and pedestrians. You have very specific documents that address those issues. Those are that were put together by your engineers, and we feel that's where it should lie.
Okay, and I asked because I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, go ahead, Mrs. Bishop.
No, I'm just trying to think through this, and I'm asking because again, like we're at the 30,000 foot view here, and a discussion as to like, you know, putting a bike route on Fremont Street, and I say that only because Fremont Street is specifically listed here. That I think those street names should probably be taken out of this comprehensive plan discussion, and then leave that for the Public Works Board and the council when we're actually putting in like, here is the preferred route. I also don't think, and this goes for transportation generally, whether it's sidewalks or bike routes or scooter lanes, whatever you want to do, like, you know, Fremont Street, College, all of those historic streets back there really only have traffic that is germane to the residents that live there on those streets. And so I don't see that specific or additional traffic designations or lanes are needed in those areas, as opposed to a larger thoroughfare in the city to get from, let's say, downtown to the grocery store. That would be more appropriate in my mind to facilitate all of those modalities of travel on the larger streets.
All right. Mr. Grady?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask Dustin, like, when you were looking at all the answers, did you see anything that was like, man, I would come to Lake Mills on my bicycle if it was safer, or like, you know, was there anything that suggested that what already is unsafe or is a deterrent from people to spend their money in the middle of a bike ride to go get some tacos?
Well, connectivity is important throughout the community for non-motorized mobility of all types, right? There's the commuter bicyclist versus taking your family to get ice cream, right? So we need that. It's interesting, is a person who got up to speak in the public comment said that they get to Main Street and then they use the lanes on Main Street, and Mr. Foster's nodding. He can remember, I'll say, a little bit of vitriol towards having on-street bike lanes on there that people were opposed to it. But now that they're there and people feel safe on it, they use it. That's obviously the most significant north-south route. Your only other real north-south route is ferry. I don't know if a family is going to feel comfortable taking their kids on Main Street to get down to the Glacial Drumlin Trail. Maybe they will. I don't want to make that judgment, but having an alternative route and biking along the lake can be kind of nice. That's why that becomes a very unique opportunity. People come to Lake Mills, live in Lake Mills, because it's a beautiful community, because it's comfortable, because they can bike here. East-west is a little more challenging than north-south, right? Unless you're on the Glacial Drumlin Trail. And people come here because I can go and bike on the Glacial Drumlin Trail, and then I can go into historic downtown, and I can have a beverage and a sandwich and go to the beach and go to the park. So, yes, I think the fact that you have certain amenities here attract people from outside the community, and I think making sure that your own residents can get there comfortably is just as important as making sure someone from out of town can navigate. But to determine which is the absolute best route and the type of improvements that should be made of whatever level, yes, that's something that needs certainly more scrutiny than a comprehensive plan can provide. I think it is important to talk in this plan about that the community values bicycle and pedestrian mobility, safety, connectivity, and that the evaluation of certain routes is going to occur, and that you're going to rely on other detailed documents to make clear what those decisions are going to be, right? So if that means kind of tweaking some language in here because maybe it feels too specific, that's the way to go. But I still think that overarching umbrella of we want to be a community where people can bike throughout at any, I'll say generally any age, right? You feel fine if your 12-year-old is biking from one neighborhood to the next, or you take your family, on a half a mile or 1 mile bike trip because you live out in Brookstone to get downtown to get ice cream, right? So we want both.
So would you say that if we're looking at the comprehensive plan, we could put something in there, just generic language, saying we want, the community desires multiple north, south, and east-west bicycle routes as part of the comprehensive plan, and then work on, then those other documents would take over for that, or is that too simple?
It is a bit of both, right? Because your long-range plans, when you go after grant money, are so important that if they aren't outlined, if specific improvements aren't outlined in long-range plans, you don't score well in going after grants. So whether it's TAP grants or economic development grants and such, depending upon what it is, right? If we don't highlight these as priorities of the community, as goals that we're trying to achieve, and that the decision makers are focused on those priorities, you don't score well in certain grants. So I don't want to say that we have to say specific routes on everything, but we also want to we do want to certainly paint the picture that we want key routes. We want more than one route to serve a variety of users within the community.
So going back to getting grants and things like that, we don't think it would be enough to have it outlined in the comprehensive plan as a long-range plan to say, we are going to look at our transportation plan, which is also another long-range plan, to outline which priorities we have.
I'll pick on a county route. Let's just say County V. If you don't show that you want bike and ped facilities on County V, and the county decides to reconstruct the road, they're not going to put them on there. Or
So
they may not consider them at all.
They're going to use the primary document of the comprehensive plan to look at those things.
Yes.
is
Now,
what you're saying.
if it's in your other documents, great. But until that document is, I guess, updated, hasn't been updated in 17, 18 years, right? And a lot of things still hold true in it. I don't want to make it sound like we're past it. But it does need to be reviewed more than every 17, 18 years. So if it's in another document, then I wouldn't worry about it. You can say, in our adopted long-range, bicycle plan or our adopted pedestrian plan, these are the things that we are going to do. Yes. So do I think we can say some things here about, and we do have in the document, update those and rely on those? Yes. Many people, though, do look at the comprehensive plan as a guidebook for those larger, mobility routes. So, but we do not have to say specifically this street, that street. We can merely mirror what's in those long-range plans right now. This document, the comprehensive plan, can always be amended, right? It is not etched in granite. So as community vision or priorities change, this document should be changing with it. But we do want to, I guess at the end of it, we do want to make sure that we're saying we want to be a community of connected neighborhoods, connected areas, because that also came out of the public survey.
Yeah.
People were very, very concerned that was a high priority for them, that they be able to, that all neighborhoods be connected for bike and pedestrians, and that they be able to get to places of business without having to get into a car.
So then I guess my assumption is that based on the comments from Mrs. Bishop, my comments, and comments from the other members, plus the folks that spoke here, you're going to take that back and use that as a guideline to make other changes to this.
Absolutely, we're going to make some changes based on what we heard tonight and the direction that you're
Okay.
telling us. We do have in the transportation plan, we have a map that shows the street hierarchy, which is really important. That is based on the Wisconsin Department of Transportation street hierarchy, which was developed with the city. So that is in there, and that's important for decision-making about which are collector roads, et cetera. You know, the faster traffic or more traffic moves on a certain road, certain types of improvements, bike and ped improvements you want to have on them to make them safer, right? So we can reflect that, we can make changes and bring them back, and certainly you can determine if that's kind of the type of direction you want here.
Yeah, but we'll definitely have some changes in the pedestrian and the bicycle path now that, oh gosh, was American Way? Is that
Oh, no,
what
it's
it is?
completed.
All the way through to Brookstone, because that'll make some other changes, whereas, so folks won't have to use the highway.
Yeah, and if you can do it more subtly with paint on the highway and, I mean, as of right now, I'm a bicycle operator. I got one of the nicest bicycles you could have. You can hold it with a finger and, I mean, you still have to pedal it, but you can go on any street. I mean, any street. I mean, you get up in the morning,
Yeah.
you can go anywhere you want. We're putting such a big emphasis on this and pressuring citizens with things that we just simply shouldn't be doing. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of this comprehensive plan, as everyone knows, other than we have to comply with the state mandate. However, all these things continue just to be so repetitive, and ultimately, the comprehensive plan is going to be fulfilled by either developers or citizens' needs, or I just, you get it so big, so deep. Who might you hamstring from it? You might hamstring a property owner. You might hamstring city engineering. Basically, there's just a guideline. I think we should just use it as such. This is gonna be a big, gorgeous document, and I'm all for the ability to change it, but to dwell so deeply on each line item, we're going back to, my opinion, day one. I don't know. I just I sit here and there's got to be some people in the audience that have concerns about what we're doing. They got to realize that this is just a guideline, and if we can change it, why don't we just get this accomplished and move on to really important things? We have all kinds of things that are extremely important, and I don't know. It's a beautiful document, but you can ride your bike on any street.
I think we understand where you're coming from here. Again, some of this is carryover from the last plan where it did spell out specific routes and such. So if you let us go back and sharpen the pencil a little bit and bring it back to you.
I will
Sounds
say,
great.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was going to say, I think that sounds great. I think the other thing is like when these proposals are made, I mean, we live in a time when a lot of people don't trust people, and so I think you look at this and then you're worried about the worst case scenario, which I think makes sense. So I think I would love to see the edits made. The other thing I really like about this though is like in the places that are yet to be habited, I like the planning that exists there, because if you can plan ahead of time, then some people, if those places become inhabited, will see how great bike travel is in those neighborhoods, and they might say, you know what, let's figure out something like that in this neighborhood. Sometimes you got to see it in order to want it, you know? So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Dan. And my last comment is, I like the comment that Mrs. Bishop put out there about signs instead of painted Cheryl's. I don't know, I just think they would last longer, but that's just my 2 cents worth.
I have a couple of comments, if nobody else had one right now.
All right, Mrs. Bishop?
It's hard to see you guys. Actually, I can't see you guys while all of the screen is being shown. So, 2 things. One, I'm going to get very detailed here. Since we are referencing the comprehensive outdoor rec plan, Mr. Wolf, the only version of that I've seen is actually a draft version for 2020 to 2025. And it has pending adoption by the Parks Board, Plan Commission, and City Council, but no adoption date. Do you know the last date this outdoor rec plan was adopted by the relevant boards?
I thought it was in 2020, and Brian is pulling that up. But yes, it went through the formal adoption process.
Oh, okay. Then I think it's worth it to. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to add that the CORP, Comprehensive Rec Plan, has to be updated every 5 years to be eligible for grant money and on file with the Department of Natural Resources. So there's a reason that it goes through a very formal adoption process as well.
Okay, yeah, then I just maybe don't have that adopted version, but I think it's worth it to say here in our comprehensive plan, you know, when we're referencing the corp, to say as adopted, you know, every 5 years by these relevant commissions. And then just set that out there so that when somebody's looking at this as a general document, they know where to go next for them to look for the corp or other relevant documents. And I think I may have had something else, but I forgot what it was, so.
Just to address, it was adopted by council, looks like the 7th of April, 2020.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Not to truncate discussion, we have a lot of other things to talk about tonight. Anything else on the transportation chapter? I see some thumbs up. That's good to see. With that, then we have, is there any additional conversation about utilities and community facilities? Again, doesn't mean we can't circle back around to it later, but we just want to be able to go into, there's final formatting that we want to do, insert infographics and such, and we don't want to do that until generally you're done with a chapter, right, that we can move on. So
Is there opportunity to like do a final review?
of course.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
You will get an entire document together. When we have all the infographic sections done, a chapter they'll be brought back forward, because then they're really, I'll say, much more user-friendly, rather than just being a lot of text. You know, we do want to have graphics and images and such in there, so it does jump off the page at people, but we just don't want to do that formatting twice. So with that, then we're going to move on to, I'm sorry.
So one other question. In regards to transportation, utilities, facilities, et cetera, does that go by Public Works? Is Public Works involved with this at all in that regard of the comprehensive plan?
I can't say that the document was specifically given to the Public Works Board. Engineering and Public Works staff have weighed in on this, but we have not taken it specifically to that body. We've brought it to you, and it's available for comment. I defer to Mr. Daly.
I think it's
Just a question.
I was just gonna say, it's been referenced a few times, but we have other more detailed plans like the transportation plan and the bicycle and pedestrian plan as well. Those detailed documents, those policy documents that kind of govern how staff may go forward with designing or incorporating features into infrastructure projects. Those are important to staff so that we know the vision and direction of the policymakers, and those documents, when we do update them back from 2005, would certainly go through the relevant committee and board process for incorporation there. So the Plan Commission, the comprehensive plan is obviously a high-level 30,000-foot document that provides kind of general ideas and goals and things of that nature, and also recommends the updating of these other plans to, I think, to solicit that feedback from the relevant boards and committees. So, you know, there would be that opportunity. Those documents are more governing documents, more policy documents that inform how we incorporate them into our infrastructure plans and what plans get presented to the boards and commissions and the city council in the capital improvement plan and things of that nature. So there certainly would be opportunity even after this was development as we work through those other documents and update them that are also outdated, to have a broader conversation, more specific conversation about these specific items with those boards as well as with the public.
Thanks. Thank you.
With that, we'll transition to housing. Again, there is just kind of a brief PowerPoint on a summary. The housing chapter is a little robust, has a lot of data, and then goes into recommendations. Ultimately, we're trying to provide a variety of housing choices to the community for existing residents and hopefully new residents, right? For different points in people's lives, because there certainly is a difference between first home buyers, empty nesters, right, senior housing, et cetera. We are always balancing a series of issues when we are making recommendations, especially with housing, on everything from private property rights to property maintenance, affordability, preservation, and the like. Just going to shift over the document itself. A little bit of understanding of housing distribution lately. According to 2020 census information, about 63% of your housing is owner-occupied single-family. That's generally in keeping with area communities. Larger communities, the Milwaukees of the world, are a little bit less than that. Smaller communities out here in suburban areas are usually a little higher. Somewhere in the 60s, though, is pretty common. But 5% of your housing stock is duplex, 21% is multifamily, and then you have 10% mobile home. The mobile home community stuff depends upon where you're at. If you're up north, right, a little bit more. If you're in an area where you have really nice resources like a lake, suddenly you get a little bit more of those. But there isn't a silver bullet on the match for this. It's really what works for your community, right? Owner-occupied is certainly kind of historically the American dream, but we do see a shift in preferences for housing now with younger generations, right? They are less preoccupied with home ownership. People in their 20s and 30s, it's kind of shifted a little bit later. Maybe they're getting into their 40s and such. Bigger conversation we're going to have a little bit later is about housing affordability issues, because housing at all levels has become much more unaffordable for younger generations. A little bit about median household value. According to the 2020 data, your median household value is about $200,000 per unit. Owner-occupied house, but in the town of Lake Mills, it's about $300,000. So it is not uncommon in the towns surrounding a key community where houses are valued at a little bit more, because you have a wider range of single-family housing stock than typically found in a town setting. Also, towns are on generally larger lots, and you'll find larger homes, especially newer construction. So I don't want you to be alarmed by that, but as you can see, when you compare yourself to Johnson Creek, you're right about the same. They're right around 200,000. City of Jefferson is a little bit lower than you, Fort Atkinson lower than you, and then the county are a little bit higher than the county. So I don't want you to be alarmed when you see something comparing you to Ashland, Milford, or Lake Mills. There is kind of rationale behind it. And they have much fewer housing units than you have. Discussion about appreciation or change from the previous year. You can see from 2016 to 2020, this is median home sale price, has increased considerably, 40% over the last 5-6 years. That gets back into our affordability issue. And anybody who has moved to the community recently, the challenges of finding housing in Lake Mills. The months that something is a single-family home is on the market is getting smaller and smaller. There just isn't a lot of inventory out there. Fortunately, Jefferson County worked with UW-Whitewater to do a whole housing study for the county and the specific communities, and we drew a lot of data from that and spoke with Dr. Cation about that study. But in the end of the day, right now, we're seeing the issue is there's not a lot of inventory, and then people aren't like buying up right now because, well, someone may say they want to sell because the market's high. Still means they generally have to buy somewhere, and they're just saying, well, I'm just going to stay pat. I'm not going to move. So it doesn't free up other housing for other potential buyers. A little bit about the age of housing stock. This is certainly important because it gets to affordability issues as well. Not uncommon. Most of your housing was, generally pre-war, but then you had a little bit in the 70s, a little bit, the 90s, early 2000s we saw, and it has dropped off considerably. And then when you look at the county's housing study, the number of platted lots and homes built just in the county is down considerably in the last 5-6 years than it was in the previous 20. Through the public survey that went out, we asked a lot of questions about housing and desire for certain housing products. The need for, I don't want to say just starter homes, but the ability to buy up throughout someone's life cycle is important, but the ability to have a home that they can afford at different points in their lives is just as important. One of the challenges we have in Lake Mills is we don't have a lot of diverse housing types to choose from. You have single family, you have multifamily, you have a handful of duplexes. We don't have really a lot of townhouses, which can be an owner-occupied side-by-side, fourplexes. We don't have a lot of different ownership opportunities. Similarly, though, we don't have a lot of also rental opportunities of different housing types. So your choice is either being in a larger multifamily development or a duplex. And there is certainly a need within the community for these products. One of the challenges that we found, and as we go through the document, is the concern that people have about integrating other housing types into their neighborhoods, right? Where there might be infill opportunities or redevelopment opportunities or growth opportunities. So you'll see that certain products that we're showing here, pocket neighborhoods, smaller houses, some score pretty well as like, I like this, but when you start looking at it, do I want this specifically in my neighborhood, it becomes a different conversation. There is no easy answer to this. We also run into the problem that we don't have a lot of developers in Lake Mills that are developing these products. That is a significant challenge, right? So the statement, we want this, is one thing. Who's going to build it is another. And then the third is it immediately something that a consumer is going to want, right? Because the developer's not going to build something that he doesn't know he has a market for. So it's a challenge that we're going to run into here. Again, single family attached, we don't have a lot of this in the community. And it is certainly something that through traditional neighborhood development and what we're trying to achieve with the planned neighborhoods is to make an opportunity for these products to happen. It is a much more cost-effective housing solution. We've had some recent ones down, the Drumlin Crossing development would fall into this category, which is behind the Topals, if you will, and along the Drumlin Trail. So you can see that people certainly have an affinity towards it. They're comfortable with it. There's certain styles, as you can see, the narrow two-floor did not score really well, but the kind of craftsman-y style on the left did score pretty well. But the issue is, how do we try to get this into our housing portfolio as a community? To find a developer to do it is going to be a challenge. Again, variety of duplex types. It shouldn't surprise anybody here. Respondents to the survey said, because of the kind of community you have, the character of your community, the houses that look turn of the century, craftsman-y, score really, really well, which is great. It means that they're comfortable with them, assuming the context can be met. When we went through the land use chapter, we did not just say we are going to make duplexes everywhere, right? That is not the goal here, but we do want to certainly enable duplex housing and smaller scale multifamily housing, as we'll see, as products within the community. Does any of this surprise anyone here?
No, I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question, Dustin. So, maybe we could use some of what we learned in that connective tissue area there by the Mangan development. What we heard from the property owners, we had enough forethought to see that the area that was going to be developed behind the existing homes was going to be single family. It ended up being a serious concern when they started talking, pushing more multifamily closer to them. Maybe we could use that as potentially a development tool in a buffer area, instead of just immediately thinking buffer multifamily, to encourage a developer to buffer up against single family with single family, and then go into some of these other products.
Absolutely. That is certainly a goal of this plan, is to try to encourage these transition missing middle type products within the community. Instead of jumping from single family to a larger multifamily, to have a variety of these other types of products that could meet those needs.
And then you're legitimately are looking out for, existing homeowners. I mean, you're really doing it then, not just providing a buffer zone, but you're legitimately looking out for existing taxpayers.
Large multifamily products, you can see things that score well, have high character, kind of fit into the context of a historic community. The kind of edge development, big setback, multifamily is not as desired by the respondents of the survey. You certainly have that here, and that's not a negative. But again, we're asking people preferences, right? So when development comes, especially larger multifamily, it is saying it's got to be contextual. It has to have a good deal of eye appeal, and it needs to feel like a logical extension of what's already within the community. As we started talking about downtown housing, again, you can see that the larger scale first floor retail, many apartments above downtown, just didn't jump out at people. And again, it goes to that scale, context, historic character, materials really does hold a lot of value here in the community. These are important things for when decisions get made, because you're going to get some redevelopment in the downtown over the life of this plan. And so to know what residents are thinking and preferences are is very important. We have a discussion of housing programs. I'm trying to kind of jump ahead to goals, objectives, and then again, the programs is really the most important piece here. There isn't a lot of change from the last document on these. Again, we did combine a few. There was a laundry list of objectives, but again, range of housing types to meet a range of personal needs, family needs, still emphasizing single family, of course, but making sure that we're providing the product that future generations are looking for and filling in those gaps. Yes.
Can one of the members or staff educate me for a second around C, housing programs? Like, I'm curious, where have we used that in the past? I mean, I'm always a little bit challenged by programs that pick winners and losers. But at the same point, like, I'm curious about opportunities to provide homeownership opportunities for people who live in this community, who are now priced out of this community. And so it seems like this is an avenue that I've seen done in other communities before. Again, picks winners and losers. They have lottery systems and things like that, which are challenged. But I don't know where have we done this in the city already?
The city has not really delved a lot into housing programs. You do have a housing authority, and you do have, it's most focused on senior housing opportunities. The county really handles most of the programs. They have the staff to do so, and at the state and federal level, dollars are generally more funneled to them than they are to a municipality of this size. We have attempted in the past, when the revolving loan program that was in place for 20 odd years, which was block grant money, expired, the city did submit an application to the state to use those dollars, which was, I'm working from memory, $700,000-800,000. Is it that much, Stan? I thought it was $350. Okay, maybe. Okay, so to use that for developing a housing program here to make housing more affordable, and it was denied because the state is really oriented towards a multifamily product to meet affordability rather than a single family product, which was what the city was trying to do. So we do run into that challenge of the state really isn't aligning with what a municipality is trying to achieve. We also did keep TID 2 open an extra year, and those dollars are still available for housing affordability. That's a few $100,000. There was the statutes allow you to keep a TID open one more year, $4 for housing things. And we did that, and we're in search of a project. And one of the things we're gonna talk about is the city has tried to spearhead that because, and Mr. Foster was on the council at that time, it was a high priority at previous council was housing affordability, and trying to develop a workforce housing project within the community and working with developers. So again, we want to show that there are programs out there that can be explored. You really do have to try to match the program to a specific project, which can be challenging.
And does that typically come through the city council? Those kinds of?
Generally, the city council would advise the city manager that this is what we're trying to do as a policy, and then they would explore the avenues to try to make that happen, or attract a developer, or a developer comes in and says, I want to do this, and I need a partner as a municipality to help procure state or federal funding.
Got it. Thank you.
So I'm not going to walk through every objective. They're very broad about providing good housing product, good housing opportunities, mixed use throughout the community, quality design standards and such. I don't want to bog down there. Policies, again, going back to our planned neighborhood, trying to encourage new neighborhood development where it's not just an isolated subdivision, but subdivision that has a variety of housing product in it, from single family to duplexes to townhouses to variety of multifamily. Again, larger scale, but to provide a product that you can move up or around within the neighborhood rather than crisscrossing the community. We talked about that at length in the land use section. Trying to make sure that any higher density residential types are complementary of single family, especially when utilized in close proximity, that they're contextual, that we retain high quality multifamily standards. Those are carryovers from the last plan and have been part of the code that was updated. And if you've seen the new Summer Ridge development or the Drumlin Crossing development, you can see that those are certainly high quality multifamily products that have been developed in the last couple of years. Encouraging new neighborhoods that mimic what has made Lake Mills, which is traditional neighborhood development types. Big front porches, people engaging with their neighbors, right? Not people being isolated, large hiding in the backyard. So programs development recommendations, this is kind of where we're going to need some feedback from you. Again, promoting those traditional lots and neighborhoods. That's a conscientious effort to make that happen. It does not happen by accident. The developers, we do need to encourage them to make sure their housing product aligns with this goal, right? To make sure that houses have front porches, that houses are not just developed in isolation where you pull in your garage and never talk to your neighbor. So when development comes in, and that can be narrower streets, obviously making sure you continue to have sidewalks on new neighborhoods, making sure that the product that a developer comes in with is meeting with this TND, traditional neighborhood development goal, and more than just single family in meeting that goal. Side by sides, townhouses, the like. I'm looking for some level of yes, some level of no. It doesn't mandate, but it strongly encourages, right?
Yeah, I think the direction is good. I like the direction that is going.
This is really the big one, prioritizing workforce housing solutions. Okay, we've talked about it at length, but ALICE is the new acronym, right? Asset limited, income constrained, but employed. These are working families, working people that are in your community, but generally can't get into home ownership because they don't have the requisite down payments. They can afford rent and pay rent, and they can afford a mortgage and can pay a mortgage, but when you start putting PMI on it because they don't have a minimum down payment amount, or the product being built or available in your community is beyond their incomes. These could be school teachers, firemen, police officers, right? This is very common in communities like a Lake Mills where the cost of housing is very high. So prioritizing workforce housing solutions, how to make housing more affordable across the board, getting people into home ownership so then they ultimately can develop equity and buy up, which then frees up lower cost housing for others, is important. The city did explore this. Do we have a graphic? Here we go. This was an option that was being explored just south of the Light and Water Building. For the city, it has a piece of land in the industrial park that has not been highly desired for industrial development, and it's across from Wallace Park. It has wetlands, it has other constraints on it, but it is was an opportunity for the city to explore doing workforce housing, and with Strand and put together an alternative to meet this. This would be narrow lots. You're talking 50-foot wide lots, no basements, with alleys. They're generally 1,600 square feet. Basements add $30,000 of cost to a house. And that little bit can be the difference between someone being able to afford it. These are people being able to afford a house under a traditional mortgage. It's just the cost of entry gets so high. This was a place where the city at that time was looking at taking those monies that it had from keeping TID 2 open to utilizing to put infrastructure in and working with a developer to turn over the lots to developers, and the developer would then work with a buyer. The lot price, because it was free land, would become their down payment. We talked to lenders, traditional lenders, and they said, yes, that is a very acceptable way for them to get their down payment covered because it's instant equity. The challenge we ran into was talking with the development community that to build a 1,600 square foot house, just the house, is $320,000. That's the cost to build a house. That's being given the land and the infrastructure. So we have this problem. That's where we were trying to utilize the block grant monies that the state said no, to use that to help offset some of those costs to get people in, to lower the initial price of the house. Trying to work with the state on housing programs where qualified applicants they have to stay there for a minimum of 5 years, but they meet a certain threshold of percent of the county median income. They would stay in there and then they could sell and then buy up eventually. This is the challenge that we're running into. It's just so expensive. It costs about $65,000 a lot to develop a lot. If you reduce the width of the lot or the size of the lot, that number comes down a little bit, right? But for the traditional R1 district that we have here, which is on the 10,000 square foot side, you're talking 65,000 a lot. Lot sales, we're hearing from the developers, is your price points aren't much more than that. So in essence, they don't make money on any lots, which means they don't want to plat lots because they don't know if they're going to be able to sell lots, right? So we are trying to work with them on how to resolve this issue, but that's where we get into affordability on single family, is the cost of infrastructure. Many communities, and again, we talk about it in the plan, that the city should explore other avenues for making lots available for development. You're doing that with the Brookstone Phase 7 and 8, where the city is really spearheading the development of the lots, and you are partnering with a builder to sell, who is buying the lots from you directly, and then working with to sell it to an ultimate buyer and build a home. There are communities in Wisconsin that are actually doing all the borrowing for the developer. So they would use their city's debt capacity to enter into an agreement with a developer for whatever the cost of the infrastructure is, and the developer would then pay back the municipality on a lot-by-lot basis, generally $60,000 to $70,000. So as a home lot package sells, they then pay the city. The reason this is happening is because municipal rates are much, much more favorable than they can get at their lending institutions, right? That is an example of what can be done because the risk is still on a developer, but the carrying costs are so much less. Because right now it's 7.5% for them to borrow money. You know, that tacks $1 million to $2 million onto a project for them that they're trying to carry for 10 years, right? So many communities are going that route. The other thing we've put in there is, again, utilizing TIF, tax increment financing, to pay for the infrastructure. Again, the developer will borrow the money and put in the infrastructure, and the TIF money, so as lots sell and they start paying, homeowner pays taxes, those monies are reimbursed to the developer over time to ultimately pay for the infrastructure itself, right? Over a 10, 15, or 20-year period to pay for that infrastructure. It minimizes the risk to the developer on developing lots because they know they have an income stream to get paid back for putting the infrastructure in. And again, we sat down with the developers here in your community And again, we meet with, I work with multiple communities. We talk with them elsewhere in southeastern Wisconsin, northeastern Wisconsin. Many communities are going this route to make sure that they have growth, that they have new lots being developed. Developers do not want to undertake development without some mechanism to mitigate their risk. And again, we sat down with them as part of the focus groups. They were very frank with us about that. I encourage the Plan Commission and the council to invite your developers here to talk to you about this specific issue on why certain development, single-family development is not happening. But I can tell you 4 communities off the top of my head that are doing both of those things that I just talked about with you, and they're still, again, seeing continued development sales of lots and home packages, so growth because of it.
Isn't there a limitation how many homes you can have in the TIF?
So depending upon the TIF type, it does say 35% of the TID by land area, but it gets a little grayer when you start talking about a mixed-use TIF. So a mixed-use TIF is intended to have multiple uses in it, so the 35% kind of goes away. Again, there are mechanisms to make that happen. The other issue is the home builders, as well as other communities, are lobbying state legislature to change the TIF law to enable TIF to be used for residential. It gets used on multifamily residential constantly. They're trying to change the law so it can be used more for single-family residential. And again, their issue is about the cost of putting in infrastructure. That's the limitation for them. Unless you are in a community where your lots sell for over $100,000, they can't make money on them, which means they don't want to take on the risk of developing 20 or 30 lots at a time when they don't know how quickly they're going to be able to sell them. That's a lot of holding costs for them. Again, these are the issues that impact housing costs and development of new housing. And I would encourage you to bring your developers in to talk about this issue with you. Municipalities now need to be a partner with the development community. The days of a developer coming in and developing the lots and then selling them to random home buyers is long gone. That will not happen anymore. Home builders, they have their entities where they have the home building side and the development side. The developers develop them and then sell them at a loss to the building side of their company, because generally they only make money on the house. On a $400,000 house in southeastern Wisconsin, again, this is a developer that does develop here, but talking about a project elsewhere. At the end of the day, their markup is they make about 10% a house. So they're making about $40,000 a house. After you put in the lot, build the house, carrying costs, et cetera. So it's why they don't want to be in the development game, meaning developing the lots. They want to be in the home building game. Because they have people who want to build houses. It's too much risk for a developer to develop multiple subdivisions in multiple communities, right? So this all gets to this housing affordability issue. Is there questions on that? Are you uncomfortable with what I just said? Because that's what's in this plan, talking about housing affordability.
Bummed out, but I think that I think this being a priority is important. I'm curious, and I'm probably going to get in the weeds, and I apologize. But like with programs like this, is there a limitation around like who can qualify? Like I'm curious if like you say like in order to qualify for something like this, you have to live in the community, or you have to work in the community. Or you have to have lived in the community for 5 years. Like don't want to create a sweet deal and have people from other places swoop in. If something like this would be done, I would want it to be for this community.
Again, when you're talking about certain housing programs, it is income-based, and it is based on family size and the percentage of their income in relation to the county median. So Dane County is a much higher median than Jefferson County, right? But for a family of 4, when I last looked at it, it's somewhere around, a family of 4 qualifies if they're making less than $65,000 a year for housing programs.
Yeah, but like as far as like kind of making sure that it's for the community, and not like you have people from Milwaukee or Dane County or wherever that's
Well,
like, hey, let's.
they're not-
I'm gonna move there because that's something. Is there a way to do that, or is that something that's not?
I encourage the council, you need to talk to the business community. They're the ones who are telling us, and I'm looking at Mr. Foster and Mr. Foster, because they were on the council at those times. Your own business community, Daybreak and others are telling us there isn't housing for their people. And they can't attract more people because there's no housing that they can afford.
I see.
Right? So it is for your community. Someone from Milwaukee is not going to drive to Lake Mills to work back in Milwaukee. I mean, that's a 45-minute commute every day, right? I mean, it is for your residents. It is for your teachers, your people working in your industrial park businesses, for attracting new talent, for retaining talent. What we've been hearing is a teacher in the Lake Mills School District lives in, I'm just going to pick an arbitrary place, Sun Prairie, because they can afford a house over there. It's an arbitrary number. I don't want to get into it. They work here for a while, and then a job comes up in Sun Prairie, and then they just move to Sun Prairie. It's not that a house comes up here and then they move here quickly. What happens is a job comes up where they're already living, and then they take that job, and then you lost them from your community altogether because there wasn't housing here for them to meet their needs. It goes to multifamily. I get that not everybody wants multifamily in the community, but there are people who want to move into your community that need multifamily to live in, right? To attract young people back to your community. Your own children who went off to school and want to come back, they need a place to live and they want a newer housing product to live in, and they don't have that. You don't provide it, right? So when
That's my point. Is I want to make sure those are the ones that end up getting.
There are people who want to live downtown, right? And they would think, well, if the Century site developed into a 3 or 4 story building with modern apartments, they would move into that. And then there's a whole other part of the community that says, we don't need that. Well, maybe you don't need that, but others do want that, right? And that's going to be a challenge. There's no silver bullet on that. But that's what you're seeing is when you're trying to attract people to your community, whether it's your own children who have left and you want them to come back, or others from elsewhere to work and live in your community, you need to have a housing product for them. And Lake Mills, you're not alone. I don't want to say that most communities don't have a housing product for them. They don't have a fourplex, right, that someone can move into. They don't have a townhouse because it costs less to buy a townhouse than it does a single family home. They don't have an apartment that, and again, it's not that they can't afford rent, but you don't have a good housing product, a good apartment housing product that has modern amenities, modern architecture, or, more contemporary design and amenities that they want to live in. You have generally older apartments from 80s and 90s, right? That's not attracting people to come back. So when we talk about housing affordability, a part of it is, yes, getting people into home ownership, but it's also having housing products that people want, and we don't have it.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I feel it's important to have a frank conversation about it in a comprehensive plan, because it is a problem. Talk to your business community. They're the ones who were telling us over the last number of years, which is why the city was exploring this option.
Right.
Because Daybreak and others were saying, we can't find housing for our people.
Yeah,
in the community.
I think what you're seeing is a demographic that in the past, that is what they did. They had single-family homes, but that's out of reach for so many now. And so this is how we get to the topic of the workforce housing, which is something we would be wise to consider.
Yes, we have communities that are lowering the minimum house size to 900 square feet to try to provide a product to get people into home ownership at a lower cost earlier in their life for those who do want to buy right away, right? Because a 2,100, 2,300 square foot house is not viable for a single person or a young couple coming into a community who are early in their career, right? Or in the trades or whatever it might be, right? That's not a practical, that's when they are established and have, again, when they have a larger family. Not everybody wants that house of 2,100 square feet. People may want to get in home ownership, but I only need 900, 1,000 square feet. Or empty nesters who are trying to divest themselves of their larger house because their family's gone, but they want to stay in the community. They don't, and they may want to be still in a single family product, but they don't want to maintain a large single family product. So those are challenging conversations when you say build a smaller house. People get panicky because they think inexpensive. They think, right, but it's still filling a very important need within the community. And your businesses are asking you to do this because their workforce doesn't have a place to live in the community.
Well, yeah, there are options that are being developed that have very attractive smaller homes and that of good character that would do well in any neighborhood.
Anything else on the housing affordability, workforce housing section? Again, focusing here on housing characteristics, we have some language on that. But again, making sure they're inviting, making sure that we're avoiding the garage-scaping, which can happen if you're not diligent about it with the development community, right? To make sure the community through the community survey says, we love the character of our community, and they want that to be replicated in new development. And the character of your community is large inviting front doors and front porches and such. So they want to see that. Some of this is a carryover, and I question if we need it in here. The enhanced multifamily design standards was from the last document. It led to the requirements that you have in the zoning code for the multifamily design guidelines. I don't know if or how much of this needs to be retained, and so we wanted to bring it to your attention.
If it's in the zoning code anyway, why put it in there?
I just want feedback, that's all. It's an area to certainly trim parts of the document. That's why it's in the zoning code, is because it was in the last comp plan. Again, we still have the discussion of neighborhood design principles because that did come out from the public about what they expect for future development, especially with the planned neighborhoods. And that's that last graphic on the planned neighborhoods that we reference in the land use chapter, but a variety of housing types. That's housing in a nutshell. I realize it's a lot. Thoughts? Are you uncomfortable with tackling some of those issues head on the way we did? Do you feel, I want you to, if you feel language is, we don't make specific recommendations about workforce housing. We post, as we talked about, using TIF or other funding mechanisms or partnering with developers as options in there or things to be explored. This does not mandate anything, but it says, city, you should look at these things and you should talk with your development community about how you can be a partner with them.
Yeah, that's important.
The funding issue is a big deal, and your developers will tell you that what they're willing and not willing to do. And if you're not growing as a community, and I'm looking at Drake on this, you suddenly get hit by the issue of levy limits. And so even if you wanted to stay exactly the same, your buying power goes down, you would end up not being able to even maintain your levy to have what you have right now. So you do have to grow at a certain percentage. And maybe you can weigh in on that.
Right. So the way municipal funding is set up, if you don't have any growth at all, you're not even able to maintain your current level of services because providing those services is more expensive every year. So if you don't change anything you're doing, no new employees, no new programs, no new services, nothing new, you just keep doing what you've always been doing, your ability to do that will continue to shrink because health insurance costs go up, people get raises, contracts have escalators, materials get more expensive, vehicles get more expensive, gas prices get more expensive. Things tend to get more expensive over time just naturally. And the way levy limits are set up is if you're not growing at all, your levy can increase 0%. So if you're happy with exactly where you are, exactly what you're doing, you still have to grow in order to even maintain that. If you don't, you will contract, and the ability to provide services will shrink over time.
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing to make sure folks know, because we hear a lot of comments, we're growing too fast, or we're growing, we need to stop growing. Fortunately, we can't.
No, and the point of having a plan is to grow in a way where you don't lose the essence of the community that you have. And I feel like you hear these comparisons to Sun Prairie or Madison or Milwaukee, and it's like,
Cottage Grove.
I have a big time problem with those kinds of comparisons because I just don't see us as a community evolving to that, especially if we keep all the things that make Lake Mills special. So I appreciate the plan. I appreciate the thoughtfulness. I think it's important. And yeah, we need to just grow smart.
Communities like Waterford, Burlington, they're kind of akin to you because they're very proximate to large employment areas. They are known as being, historic communities that have high quality of life, great schools. I think they're good measuring sticks for you, and these are the issues that they are grappling with. The developers are telling us the perfect lot size for them to try to maximize, to minimize the cost per lot of infrastructure, 60 feet wide by 120 feet deep. Because that's wide enough where you don't have to go to alleys. So you can still have a garage coming out the front. But it's not too big a lot. They can get their normal size house on there, somewhere around the 1,900 square foot range. But when you start bringing up that to the public, they get concerned, right? Because they think small lot means inexpensive house, which means, right? So your zoning code allows even lot sizes down to 5,000 square feet in certain districts because you have 5,000 square foot lots in the community to make them legal and conforming. Your code would enable a lot of the things developers want to do. It's the need for the community to partner with the developers to make them happen. Right? Have frank conversations with them.
Wow. Yeah. And also people can have a short and selective memories. There are many of us of a certain age that we recall growing up in neighborhoods of lots that had 50 to 60 wide frontages and 120 feet deep, and there was a lot of space.
Again, you have a great park system. You have a lot of amenities. I mean, so I'm going to ask you to obviously revisit this over the next few weeks so we can talk about again if there's more that you feel needs to be touched on, things that aren't clear. There's a lot of discussion on that missing middle, which is, again, that housing product that Lake Mills needs to attract and retain certain residents. So we're always looking for updated images that people want to use. So that's what we have for you tonight. I know we went only a few minutes longer than expected. But is there any other feedback for us now, or?
I think this all went very well in the time that we had, so very, very commendable.
Excellent, excellent. We have some revisions to bring back to you on the transportation chapter, and we'll get those sorted as well. And like I said, next month we're going to be distributing the agriculture, cultural and natural Resources Chapter.
You can call it ACF.
All right.
Cultural is all the history stuff, so,
Well, that'll be good too. All
thank
right.
you.
All right, so staff and plan commissioners, is there anything else that anyone wants to talk about this evening?
I'd just like to have an agenda item for next month that we can talk about, the old part of town. I'd like to propose some things, and I'd like to have it so we can talk about it, and I don't know, I talked to Attorney Drescher a couple months ago about
Yeah.
maybe creating some, lost for words, a proposal that we can talk about, so
Okay. So,
just put it, so we have an agenda item so we can actually talk about it.
all right, do you want to call it a land use issue?
Yeah.
And then,
Or a rezoning, actually, probably.
all right. Okay, well, let's,
Communicate with Dan.
okay, well, let's have that on the next agenda, and then you'll be the host, as it were, of that item. Okay, all right, that sounds good. All right, is there anything else for this evening? In that case, would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Grady and seconded by Mr. Holman to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? We're adjourned.